Hey YouTube, welcome back. When you're building a character, you're building it for one of a couple reasons. Maybe you're building the best possible character so that you can have fun. Maybe you are pushing a character into high corruption, or you want to be rank 1 on the ladder and you want to go as far in the arena as possible. Or sometimes, like in the case of this build here, we just want to make the best possible Cinder Strike build without regard to whether it's pushing in the arena, whether it's getting to high corruption, because we know that the skill that we're starting out with, well, it's not that great. Cinder Strike has a couple fundamental issues with it, and that's kind of why I wanted to play it. Whenever I hear people talk about Cinder Strike, they're kind of making fun of it. It doesn't really have the more damage multipliers that you would expect to see on a skill that can scale well into the late game of last Epoch. So starting from that point, we tried it out, and what we ended up with is, okay, it's a little bit low on damage, but it's really fun playstyle. I ended up enjoying this character a lot. We pushed all the way to level 100 in hardcore solo, and the character is comfortably farming low-level empowered monoliths. We have our corruption up to about 120, 130. And honestly, for most of my characters that I take to level 100, by the time that I'm finished gearing, and by the time that I have all the empowered blessings that I want, my characters are probably level 100 already, and I'm ready to move on to the next character. So my requirements for a build to feel fun, to feel playable, I don't need millions of damage, and I don't even need hundreds of thousands of damage. But what I need is a build that can farm quickly, that can kill some bosses, can kill some empowered shades of Robus, and have a good time while we're at it. So, with that said, this character was super fun. It's a little low on power. If anything with Cinder Strike gets changed in the future, if Ignite gets changed in the future, then this build could be something that you seriously consider to be a tool to push as far as possible. Right now, this build has been fun. It's been really enjoyable to play. But if you're looking for the strongest possible build, this is not something that's going to be on your radar. So that said, let's talk about the offense and the defense first. This was my first Blade Dancer character, and actually my first Ignite character as well. So I learned a lot on the way. Let's talk about those two things, and then we'll go through the skills, the gear, and anything else that comes up. So offensively, this entire build is based on Ignite. We're attacking quickly, we're proccing as many Ignites as possible. We're converting all bleed chants to Ignite with a unique pair of gloves called Malin's Hubris. And then locally, with Cinder Strike itself, we're converting all poison chants to Ignite. So whenever you see poison chants, you know that that's scaling the Ignite damage on Cinder Strike. And whenever you see bleed chants, you can know that all of that is being converted into Ignite chants for the entire build. So defensively, there's a couple things to outline first before we go through the mastery and the rest of the gear. We have no dodge in this build because we've converted it all over to glancing blow chants. So we're talking about the fact that we have 2 daggers here instead of having 2 swords. And we're using Apostacy in our mastery in order to just like cap our glancing blow chance and get that extra damage reduction as often as possible. Now, even though we can't dodge, on the Apostasy node itself, you'll see that it says like we can still dodge using Silver Shrouds, and those come up fairly often through the use of us dropping below 7% health, and also having Smoke Bomb. So we're still going to have like some dodge in the build, but like our dodge percent rating, there's nothing like that. Next up, we can talk about life recovery. So because we're an Ignite build, we're not really scaling our hit damage. Our actual hit damage is very, very low because of the daggers that we're using here. But we hit very fast, and we're applying lots and lots of Ignites. So the way that we're actually recovering life in this build, well, we could try to get like global damage leached as life. Maybe we use like a unique relic here, but for the purposes of this build, because we attack so quickly, we have health gain on melee hit, tier 5 on this, and then we have health gain on melee hit, tier 3 on this dagger here. Along with that, we also have shift healing us, and then we're making liberal use of our potions for recovery. And the last thing to talk about before we talk about the gear and the mastery and the skill specializations is iframes. So iframes, invulnerable frames, it's when we literally cannot take damage. So while we're shifting, we cannot take damage at all because we've spec'd into that. And also, well, we're proccing a bunch of stuff. We're proccing Shurikens, we're proccing Shadow Cascade, so we don't need to have those things in our skill bar here. So this is an unspec'd Lethal Mirage, and it helps us have some extra cooldown recovery speed during which we cannot take damage. So it's kind of like cooldown recovery speed in quote unquote, but as our shift is on cooldown and maybe our smoke bomb's on cooldown or maybe we don't want to be taking damage, we can just click this and we have 1 or 2 seconds of we cannot take any damage because we're in our Lethal Mirage. We're immune for a short duration. So working this into our duration means that we can do things like we can dash, bonk, then we can go into our Lethal Mirage, bonk again and dash away. And that's applying a lot of Ignites. It's applying 2 of our bonks from Cinder Strike, and then for the majority of that duration, if we want to keep moving around, we can just like stay invulnerable, not taking any damage, and get away with kind of a low health total even though we have a bunch of damage reduction and we've capped our endurance here. So ideally, this character would have 2k life, maybe 2.5k life, but throughout our entire gearing process, I feel like I got really unlucky all the way to level 100. We never really found a sufficient way to get enough life, to get enough resistance, to get enough damage into all of our gear, and I kind of had a hard time gearing this character up. Ideally, we'd have like another 500, another 700 life on top of this, which you could get if you had the right stats on all of your gear. That said, it felt sufficiently tanky, and more importantly, felt really fun to play. So let's go ahead and talk about the skill specs first. So first things first, we are an Ignite Cinder Strike build. That means that we have all of our points down here. We have 2, 2, and 1. Flammable Toxins allow us that locally we can turn all poison chants in our build into Ignite chants as well. So we have 20 plus 2. Our last 2 points went into Kindling here. Otherwise, we'd have 2 out of 5, but now we have 4 out of 5. And then we have just 1 point spec'd into Burning Dagger. We're only spec'ing into this so that we can have 1 extra hit, which is 1 extra proc of all of our ignites and our ignite chance, things like that. Beyond that, we're coming down here, 1 point in oil coating and 3 points into combustible. We probably have maybe 7 to 8 stacks of oil coating while we're clearing a map on average. If we're just wailing away on single target damage, maybe we're doing like Shade of Aerobus or something, maybe we get up to 15 or maybe 16 stacks of oil coating. But realistically, while I'm clearing, I probably have about 7, maybe 8 stacks of this. So trying to spec more points into this when we already have Firewalker here, it's not really necessary. We have 3 points down here in combustible. This gives us some extra fire penetration and ignite effect. Remember, ignite effect is only the ignite's base damage. So on the left side of the tree, we have a couple points here, 1 and then 3. 3 points in eagerness means that our second and third attacks have even more attack speed, and this means that we're getting off that first hit more consistently, that one big bonk. Up here is 4 out of 4 points in Blast Wave, and this is first attack, more damage multiplier. Remember, it does not say hit, so it does affect the ignite damage, which is great. And then we have some extra air effect here too. I want to point out that as we're bonking, keep an eye on the icon in the bottom middle of my screen. If you walk around for 2 seconds, then this resets, which means that while you're clearing, you can bonk once and dash, get to the next pack of monsters, bonk once and dash, and then walk up to the next pack of monsters. So for the most part, if you see me clearing a monolith, if you see me running from one objective to the next objective, I'm going to bonk once and then I'll dash, and that's pretty much what my playstyle is. We have Shadow Cascade is like the next thing in our build that's dealing damage. We have a little bit of utility up here with Incapacitate. So the rest of this, we have 4 points into Dagger Dance, 1 and 4 over here. This is Bleed Chance that, remember, because we're using our unique gloves, this Bleed Chance is getting converted into Chance to Ignite. So our Shadow Cascade is igniting. We have some extra ignites over here from the daggers. And then I put some points into Leverage Momentum here. Leverage Momentum says Shadow Cascade deals more damage. So it doesn't say hit. So it is applied by or it is inherited by the ignites as well. This is per 1% increased melee attack speed you have. So the increased melee attack speed is this modifier here, 136. We have about 136 right now. As I attack, as I get my stacks of flow up, you'll see it goes to about 159 or so right here. And then 159 times 0.6. I don't want to do math in front of you right now, but for the most part, these nodes here, they work out to be about 30% more damage per point, sometimes at 20% more damage per point, depending on how many stacks of flow that we have. So suffice it to say, this is a very good point for us to spec into. It's a lot of generic more damage that scales our ignite. After that, let's talk about Shurikens. I think Shurikens is probably the weakest part of the build, so we'll just kind of blow through this. We're not getting too much here, but we are getting defense, and I think the defense is worthwhile. Next up, let's talk about Shift. Shift has a couple of key components to it. Light of Hand up here, which means that anytime that we shift, anytime that we're using this dash, we're generating this extra layer of defense. So you'll see that my armor is about 1400, 29%, and then as my Shurikens fall off, it's about 19%. So I'm gaining about 10% increased armor overall just by having shift up. After that, we're coming to Shadow Slip and just 1 point into Elusive. Remember, this is additional dodge chance, but we are using Apostasy, which we'll talk about in just a moment here when we get to the Mastery Tree. But this does mean that our Glancing Blow is 48% chance to standing still, and because of that 1 point that we have in Shift, if we dash once, it caps our Glancing Blow for just that small period of time. So you'll see that if we have Smoke Bomb up, if we've dashed recently, if we're hitting things, or if we've even been hit recently, if any of those things has happened recently, then we're capped on Glancing Blow. If we're just standing still and a monster walks up to us, I guess we're not capped. But realistically, we're capped all the time on our chance to receive a glancing blow. The rest of shift, we talked about the Shurikens here, talked about invulnerability with 1 point in elusive here. The next important part is going all the way down to the bottom right, which means that we're using Shadow Cascade. We don't need to have that on our bar, but anytime that we dash, we have the Shadow Cascade going off, and also the daggers going off, and also the Shurikens going off. The last point is coming up and to the left. This is consumed by Shadow. This just gives us a kill threshold that we don't otherwise have in the build. Another benefit of this is Unseen Strike counts as a melee attack. So when we have things like 8 health gained on melee hit, if we dash through a pack of enemies, we're going to gain a lot of life because we have a lot of small hits, and we also have Shadow Recuperation, which gives us a chunk of life. The last skill to talk about is Smoke Bomb. Smoke Bomb has a couple interesting things going on here. We're converting all of the chance to apply Armor Shred into Poison Chance. And remember, Poison Chance, locally for Cinder Strike, is converted into chance to ignite enemies. The next important part is coming to the top right, just a couple points here, giving us more Dust Shrouds more frequently so that we can cap our Glancing Blow chance just by standing in our Smoke Bomb. Next up is these couple points down here, just 1, 2, 3. This gives us a Silver Shroud. We don't need to put multiple points in this, just 1 point here. And it says that we guaranteed dodge the next attack. The last bit is maybe a little bit extra duration here, but I guess the last bit that's important for us is speccing into Concealed in Carnage. So Crimson Shrouds give us Bleed Chance. Bleed Chance gets converted to Ignite Chance because of the unique gloves we're using. And this gives us an on-kill way of generating Crimson Shrouds. We have a way of generating Crimson Shrouds on hit as well in our Mastery, but we'll get to that in just a bit. So speaking of the Mastery, here we are. We have 41 points in our base Rogue tree, 64 points in a Blade Master, which is our Mastery, and then 8 off points in Marksman, just for these extra points in Dexterity and the dodge rating debuff against rare and unique enemies. So we are level 100, which means there's a lot more points in this Mastery tree than you're going to have once you're leveling up a fresh character, because you're going to be like level 80, level 90 for a bit, until you make the grind for level 100. So I would say that these 8 points in Thief Guard, I think I underestimated how good health on Glancing Blow was as soon as we capped our Glancing Blow chance. Until you get to like your late 90s or so, I wouldn't worry about these kinds of points. I would just fill in the whole rest of the skill tree instead. So let's take a look at what else is in the skill tree. We have 8 points in attack speed, which feels really good. We could spec into something like this. This is every third hit has an extra bleed, and these bleeds do get affected by their conversion to ignite. So this could fit in our build, but I found myself wanting more defense, and I found myself wanting more other pieces of the build instead, so I didn't end up opting into this. But we have 8, 8, and 1 into Guile, and 1, 5, 1. We have as much defense as possible coming from evasion, less damage taken while moving, and then just 1 point for chance to gain haste on hit. You can spec more points on this, but this felt fine for me. Don't really feel like I need any more. Next up, we are dual wielding. We have to dual wield for this build because we want as much poison, which gets converted to ignite chance as possible, so just 1 point here. And then we have 5 points in glancing blows, and also 4 points into sapping strikes. This is actually pretty important. We need this sapping strikes here, and let's show you why real quick before we talk about the Blade Dancer skill tree. So in my skills, if we look at Cinder Strike and we look at this, we see what Burning Dagger says. Burning Dagger says that it consumes 8 mana, granting you a Burning Dagger. But Cinder Strike itself has a mana cost of 0. So even though once we attack something, it's going to consume 8 mana, it still counts as using a skill that costs 0 mana. And what that means is we're using a skill that costs 0 mana, we're consuming 8 mana in order to shoot out this Burning Dagger that we spec'd into, but we immediately get that mana back, which means that we have a net 0 mana cost in the skill. So we do need all 4 points here in Sapping Strikes. This also means that on hit, or so I guess on skill use, we're gaining that 16 extra life. Let's look at the Blade Dancer tree here. We have 8, 8, 5. All of these points are very important for us. Glancing Blow chance on hit, Glancing Blow chance when we receive a hit, and then also increased attack speed and chance to gain a Dust Shroud on hit. This is all super important for us, and it's kind of like the baseline for our defenses. On the bottom here, we have 1, 5, 1. Just enough points to get the melee attack speed buff. We don't really care about the increased damage here when consuming the flow, but we do want the increased attack speed while we have that flow bonus. So these points are great. Maybe just 1 point in here as well for the extra bleed chance. Remember, bleed gets converted to ignite as well, so that feels very good. We have 10 out of 10 points here. This is poison chance per equipped dagger, and then all that poison chance gets converted on Cinder Strike into ignite chance, which feels great. And then we have 1 point here and 5 points here. So this is the chance to gain a Crimson Shroud on melee hit. This is a bleed chance. And remember, because of the gloves we're using, all the bleed chance is converted to ignite chance. So those Crimson Shrouds feel great. So the last point here that we need to talk about is Apostasy. And I need to talk about this for just a little bit because we spent maybe 2.5 days on stream, mostly just talking about Apostasy and all the different scenarios in which this thing is good, is not good, belongs in your build, maybe doesn't belong in your build. So this converts your dodge chance into Glancing Blow. And the biggest thing is, well, how much Glancing Blow chance do you have as often as possible? How consistent is your defense? Because if you have a 100% chance to receive a Glancing Blow, that's 35% damage reduction. And we really, really want that on our character as often as possible. Oftentimes, you'll see people spec into these nodes down here, which is weapons of choice, and this has Glancing Blow chance with 2 swords. If I were using swords, then I would have plus 40 Glancing Blow chance here, and then all these Dust Shrouds here, and then also Smoke Bomb, and maybe even a chest piece that says chance to gain a Dust Shroud when you use a melee attack that hits an enemy. These kinds of things would give you really consistent Dust Shroud generation and Glancing Blow generation. For me, I'm dual wielding daggers because the daggers have chance to poison on hit and chance to poison on hit. So that's where I'm getting a tremendous amount of poison chance. Along with this, poison chance to 2 daggers, 160% chance. If I open up my character sheet here, you'll see that on my other tab, my bleed chance is 39, just standing still. My poison chance is 605, standing still. And my global ignite chance that applies to everything is just 24%. So this is a lot of poison chance that we're getting because of how we've spec'd our character. And remember, all of that poison chance, it's actually ignite chance. So because I don't get to use this node in order to cap my Glancing Blow chance, we've spec'd into this. I was dubious about it for a bit, but I think we made the right choice. If I were dual wielding swords, I would try to not take Apostasy. On average, I would like to not take Apostasy. If you have enough dodge rating, you can dodge up to 85% of all hits in the game. You can't cap your dodge, you can't dodge everything, but you can dodge 85% of stuff. So obviously, if you have capped dodge chance along with a couple Glancing Blows, that's going to be better effective HP than converting all of that into Glancing Blow chance. But for me, and my limitations of having 2 daggers in the build, I'd rather have the Glancing Blows as often as possible to limit the amount of damage that I'm taking, right? So I have a bunch of life gain on hit, I have a bunch of life gain on skill use, life gain on kill, all those sorts of things. As long as I can buffer the damage that I'm taking and kind of soften the blow as often as possible, having this Apostasy is excellent. So I like this a lot. This totally belongs in the build here. For the rest of the mastery, it's a much shorter conversation. We have 1 point here in Argent Veil just to get a Silver Shroud whenever we drop below 70% health. If I were some sort of low life ward build, maybe I would want more than this, but just 1 point in here is perfect for us. The last thing is the importance of Death's Door. Death's Door looks like endurance if you squint at it, which is why it's perfect for us. For the most part, if you're stacking any kind of life and you are caring about your endurance threshold, this is the kinds of things that would help you as well. Next up, let's talk about the gear, and then we'll touch a little bit on the idols after that. So for the gear, we've got 2 uniques. I want to call these things out first. I built this character around using Malin's Hubris. You could also use Wing Guard as an excellent way of getting a ton of attack speed because we don't actually care about crit chance. So as you're leveling up, as you're just like getting started with this build, if you don't have Malin's Hubris, you could just use Wing Guards or anything with a bunch of attack speed instead. But once you get this converts bleed chance to ignite chance, and it helps things like Crimson Shrouds become more helpful for the build. It helps things like the bleed chance on Shadow Cascade and the Shadow Daggers feel more consistent in the build as well. So these belong here. However, in terms of like what gives you the most damage, these Fiery Dragon Shoes, they give you a bigger increase to your overall damage than Malin's Hubris though. These have 32% increased effect of Ignite if you have a good roll on these. Goes from 25 to 35. Thankfully, I've got some nice ones here. But these are a huge increase in our damage. It's about 20% more damage overall, including these in the build, as opposed to just like a normal pair of boots instead. If I could only choose one, I guess I would choose these, but realistically, both of these are pretty good role players in the build. If you didn't have either one, it's no big deal. Just getting as much attack speed on the gloves as possible and as much life on the boots as possible. Let's go through the rest of the gear here. Ideally, we'd like to have health and percent health here, health and percent health here, percent health and hybrid health here. We'd like to have, more than 1500 life. Yeah, but unfortunately this character was like a little bit unlucky in getting reasonable gear Maybe I'm too greedy when it comes to the gearing process, but I never really found anything that I liked. So this is what we've ended up with. What I will say is cooldown recovery speed is A+. It helps us combo our shift and our smoke bombs and our lethal mirage as quickly as possible, and having all of those iframes, those moments when we're invulnerable and can literally take no damage. For this bit here, for the chest piece, you could go for exalted dexterity or some huge dexterity roll, because remember, every 1 point of dexterity not only gives you 10% increased damage, but it also gives you some dodge, which you're probably converting into chance to receive a glancing blow one hit. So that could be an option, but Ignite effect is excellent as well, and then chance to gain a Dust Shroud when you use a melee attack that hits. This prefix modifier is nuts. I wouldn't leave home without it. I think it totally belongs in the build. And then for the suffixes, health, 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 as much as you can possibly get. For the weapons, there's kind of 4 things that we want, and this has kind of low rolls on it, but it's a good example of what we're kind of looking for. We want damage over time, we want melee attack speed, those are huge for us. And then for the suffixes, we want health gain on melee hit, which is a crucial part of us staying alive when there's a bunch of enemies around, and then as much chance to bleed or chance to ignite as possible. We'd like to have bleed or ignite. We'd want to stay away from poison, because remember, poison only becomes ignite chance locally on Cinder Strike. So if we want to scale the ignite chance for Shadow Cascade or the Unseen Strike or even Lethal Mirage or the Shurikens that are spinning around me, if we care about all that stuff as well, we'd like to have bleed, which is ignite, or just ignite by itself. For our rings, or for any piece of jewelry really, we're looking for elemental damage over time. It scales much, much higher than the other things do. If we had like percent increased fire damage, well, it's not really that big. Percent increased damage over time rolls a little bit higher, and then elemental damage over time, because it's like the most specific line of text, it rolls really, really high. So anytime that we have an option between like this kind of damage or that kind of damage for percent increased damage, elemental damage over time is A+ for us. Dexterity is probably the other thing that you aim for this as well. The throwing attack speed here obviously does nothing, but dexterity would be 10% increased damage per 1 point of dexterity, and then it also gives us some extra dodge, some extra defense for the build. For the belt slot, because we can get hybrid life on it, we should get hybrid life on it. Because we can get percent life on it, we'd like to get percent life on it. Those things are obvious, but you know, you do what you can in order to cap your critical strike avoidance. Regarding the prefixes for this, we'd like to have as big the ignite chance for 4 seconds on potion use as possible. If we could only choose one between elemental damage over time and ignite chance, 10 out of 10, we'd rather have the ignite chance here. So if you can only have one, you'd rather have that. Ideally, you would have both, you know, tier 5 or tier 6 or tier 7 elemental damage over time, and also the ignite chance. But if you could only choose one, the ignite chance is a better thing to have. On our relic here, there's actually some interesting choices that we could try to make for uniques, but what we'd look for ideally would be the Cinder Strike, +2 to Cinder Strike with the hybrid modifier of increased fire damage. If it didn't have the hybrid fire damage on it, maybe we consider something else, but the +2 to Cinder Strike, remember, that takes us from 20% chance to shred fire resistance on hit, all the way up to 40% chance to shred fire resistance on hit. And we attack with tons and tons of attack speed, and that also gets inherited by the Shadow Daggers as well, which means we have tons and tons of small hits with which to shred the enemy's fire res. So let's pop this thing open real quick. I have a unique that we talked about including this much earlier on. It's an option, but I think you'd rather just have like a good fire damage, chance to ignite on hit, oil vial instead. So this has 153% chance to ignite on hit with fire skills. The last piece of gear would just be the amulet here. If at all possible, we'd like to use a jade amulet, which is nice because when gambling it, it's about 1/3 as expensive as trying to gamble a bone amulet. Bone amulets are obviously very, very good per point because they give you up to like 44% physical res and necrotic res, which makes it much easier to gear the rest of your character. However, if you get something that looks like this, that melee attack speed just makes it so that we're attacking so much faster. We have the good life gain on melee hit, and we're igniting all that more often. It feels very good. The last thing to talk about is the idols. We have some okay idols here. They could be double damage idols instead. So we could have something that looks like this here. So poison chance per equipped dagger, along with percent increased damage while wielding a dagger. The rest of these are just like a little bit of Ellie res, a little bit of Ellie res, some Fizz res, and some Fizz res, just to round out the rest of the resistances. So that about does it for our Ignite Cinder Strike character. This character was way more fun to play than I thought it was going to be. If you're looking for the highest DPS build, if you look at a build and view it as a tool to get to the top of the ladder, or as a tool in order to get to 1000 corruption, this is not the build for you. This is not like a competitive build. However, Cinder Strike is not really a competitive skill to begin with. So it is what it is. It's a lot of fun to play. It's got this nice combo play style of having Cinder Strike and Lethal Mirage and bonking and dashing away. It's very enjoyable to play. It just happens to be on the low end of damage. We're going to move on. We've got patch 8.3 dropping in a couple days here. I've got more leveling streams than I need to do as well. Actually, tonight I'm going to be doing some Primalist leveling. So if you're into that, you can check YouTube later on. I'm trying to post up some videos talking about how those leveling sessions have gone. And then hopefully for me, I'm just going to get better at leveling too. So I can get through the campaign and start doing more sweet builds and empowered monoliths. So that's about it. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time.